We're now recording. And so, as I started to say, we've got 3 of the board members who volunteered to do their analysis. Brenna's going to talk about the president and Congress at the very highest level. Matt is going to talk about the state of Maryland, and Pete will be talking about the local results, particularly the ones we were involved with as part of this. Each of these are not any official position of the Maryland Forward Party, the National Forward Party. They're volunteers who have been involved in the political arena for a while and are very knowledgeable and have agreed to share their thoughts and ideas. So thank you for their time put in on the analysis, and want to set everybody's expectations in that regard. We're really hoping that this can be a very interactive session, and each of the speakers would welcome your questions. You can do that by clicking the raise your hand button, and we'll recognize you to ask a question, or put it in the chat. Either way, we'll recognize it and ask and get that question asked. When we get into the panel discussion, we'll certainly hope we'll have lots of discussion as part of that. And in terms of any of the discussion, if you have a difference of opinion, we'd like to hear that too. So let's make this interactive and everybody involved as much as we could as part of that. We do have a number of new folks joining us, and I will spend a few minutes for those I haven't talked to about thinking about getting involved with us as a volunteer, and how to do that. And then we'll just open it up for questions from the floor, and then also suggestions for questions, topics that we should discuss at our December or January meeting, and what are the things that you folks want to hear about, and that we can talk about that would help you in terms of getting more involved and helping to be effective in that role. So with that, I will introduce our first speaker. Brenna Vega is one of our board members. She's ran our events team for at least a year and a half, and done a great job in doing that. So Brenna, over to you.
Cool, thanks, Bill. And I'm glad Bill pointed out this is more of kind of my take on how to think about what went on nationally. I didn't want to look at the blame game or anything like that. Wanted to kind of just share some of the things that I've been thinking as I've been, frankly, coping with the results. I also start with, I actually don't live in the state of Maryland. I actually live in West Virginia. I got involved with Forward Party pretty early on, and we had a small group of like 3 people in West Virginia, and they kind of fell away. And so I ended up getting involved with Maryland. And so electoral reform, voting reform has been a really big thing for me, which is why I've been really happy to work with this group. And I think that's one of my big takeaways that I'll get into here in a minute. But so what I really wanted to share was, I think some of what I'm hearing from kind of the folks that are surrounding Trump and from Trump himself, right, is we've got a mandate from voters. We heard loud and clear that what we're saying is what people want. And so what I'm hoping that you guys will take away from what I'm going to share here is, maybe that's not really the whole true story. And keep in mind that it really was not a landslide. A lot of that is because of the Electoral College and how those numbers kind of broke down. But the reality is less than 51% of voters voted for Trump. So it's not that there was this massive landslide. Like, we don't have this huge groundswell of support for kind of that rhetoric, that approach to politics. I think Americans still very much are in this place in the middle, but, loudest voices tend to take up the most space, right? So that was one thing to for me, as I think about and walk around in the world after the election, is a reminder that it wasn't a landslide, and a reminder that it wasn't this massive statement of really supporting necessarily this next administration and the decisions that are coming out from it. One of the things that does give me a lot of pause, though, is it was the trifecta, right? We're going to have leadership across all branches of the government, including, frankly, the Supreme Court. that are all very much in what feels like a very radical conservative space. But I wanted to just ground you guys in taking a look at the comparison of Democrats and Republicans in the current Congress and what's projected for the 119th Congress. And, really the numbers have not changed that significantly. So from an ability to legislate and an ability to push work through and bills through, that may not change necessarily as much. Of course, the control of what does get through is really the big question here. But this is kind of one small thing that gives me like a little bit of hope, is it didn't change that drastically. And so hopefully there will be some voices of reason that don't give up their duty to advise and consent. The other thing that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention was the overall shift in red across the country. And I've got the link on the next slide, but it's really interesting. The New York Times did an analysis on the various groups. Yeah, thanks, Bill. The various groups that shifted more red. This shows kind of just a general county view, but that second link, and maybe I'll drop it in the chat once I'm done talking. But if you look at that New York Times article, it shows down by each demographic how much of a shift each demographic moved. And one of the big ones that was really surprising, I mean, not surprising, we knew that this was happening, but just the size of it and the scale of it was 13.3 percentage point shift for Hispanic counties. There was 86 counties across the US. And so we did see a very significant red shift. But I think that then goes back to the previous slide where the numbers didn't change that drastically. So though it may feel like there's this really big, overwhelming red wave, it really wasn't that. And Bill, can you go back to the last slide real quick? What I kind of wanted to leave with or have you all think about is this quote from Lydia Polgreen. This thing I keep coming back to explain tonight, and this is from a live chat from the New York Times editorial board as they were watching the results come in and really just kind of reacting pretty early on to seeing all of the votes go in for Trump. But Trump has a very clear vision. We're going to take you back to a time when America was great. It's a lie, of course, but it's simple. We're not going back as not a vision for human progress. There is an emptiness to it, expecting the listener to fill in the blank. And I mean, I'm studying vision and strategic narrative in my PhD right now, so this is particularly interesting for me. But what I wanted to leave you all with is how can Forward be part of shaping a different version of that future, a future that doesn't feel like it's excluding people or it's taking away people's rights, and I won't get into kind of all of the rhetoric of it, but what role can Forward play in shaping kind of what comes next? If we feel that the systems are broken, if we feel that our voting systems are not what we want them to be, what is it that we need to shape it, and how do we articulate that for the next time around? So, all right, with that, I can hand it off to Matt.
Thanks, Brenna. So yeah, I'm going to go over probably the less surprising election results that we saw earlier this month. There was the larger red shift throughout the country, but that did not really take place here in Maryland. We saw pretty predictable results pretty much across the board. Every incumbent that was up won.
Matt, if I could jump in for just a second. Any folks have any questions, thoughts that they wanted to share with Brenna on the national level before we switch over to Maryland? Sorry, I should have done that quicker.
No problem.
Okay, Matt, over to you.
Sure. So yeah, Harris won at the top of the ticket, unsurprisingly here for Maryland. The Senate race looked close for a while, but there was pretty clear data that said Alsobrooks was going to run away with that in the closing chapter. And that significance given Hogan's popularity and not that our endorsement moved the needle for him too much, but there was clear independent support for Larry Hogan, the former governor, but it was not enough to overtake Ulster Brooks and the might of the Democratic Party here in Maryland. At the House level, Andy Harris, the one Republican in the state who's there at the congressional level, won his seat again. And then Democrats took the rest of the slate. The ones in bold there are the freshman reps. Maryland 6 was pretty much the only district that was competitive. That one pretty much came down to the wire. And April Delaney, who is married to, I believe, the former representative of that same district, who ran for president back in 2020, albeit not a huge race. But yeah, so pretty unsurprising results throughout. The key takeaways, really, Maryland remains a one-party controlled state. But what's interesting is you have the Democratic Party at the national level. Really, as Brenna mentioned, there's a bit of the blame game going on. You have strategists, you have campaign employees, you have media, you have everybody trying to figure out who's at fault for what happened, why races across the country, at least at the top, fell apart. Some of the Senate races fell apart, and of course the House as well. So one of the things that I certainly don't have an answer for you about, but I'm definitely curious, is how will that impact Maryland's Democratic Party here at the state level, because they have been successful and they did not experience this larger shift. But if the party from the very top is going through, however you want to put it, soul search, realignment, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, there's some uncertainty there. It'll be very interesting to see how that plays out here at the state level. You could see Maryland doubling down on progressive policies, trying to be the example for Democratic states around the country. California has some red districts in it, but it shifted a little bit further that way. I saw an article that talked about, Maryland's going to be the new California and try to take the lead as the example for progressive politics. I'm not sure that's what Maryland wants, but we're going to find out. It'll be definitely interesting to keep an eye on. Another thing that I want to highlight is there are, while yes, Democrats pretty much ran away with the whole slate, it is not an insignificant number of voters who did not vote for a Democrat, or in some cases, or a Democrat or a Republican here in Maryland. There are a lot of independent voters here in Maryland that either are registered Democrats on paper so that they can vote in those primaries, or that have, gone as far as to just register as unaffiliated or independent or Green Party or Libertarian, whatever their values are there. There is a large voting base here in Maryland that is not comfortable in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party as it exists today. So while we are a state that is definitely controlled by one party, it is not an impossible task in front of us. We have an audience. We saw 240,000+ people split their ticket between Hogan and Harris. I can't imagine. Obviously, none of those people were happy on the day after the election. And those were people that were not willing to subscribe. Yeah, Bill's raising his hand. Those were not people that were willing to subscribe, wholly to one party's ideology or the other. And that certainly resonates with me. And I think resonates with a lot of people that are drawn to Forward or one of the other options that's, trying to put itself out there. There was another candidate here in Maryland named Rob Steinberger. We actually met with Rob throughout his campaign. He had never run for office before. He did run as a Republican, very much a non-MAGA Republican, a centrist. We'd kind of call him a Hogan Republican in Maryland here. He'd never run for office. He told us that he'd actually, some people from the Maryland Republican Party, after he won his primary, kind of came up to him and said, "How did you do that? We've never heard of you." But he did it by running to the middle and being a reasonable person. And with no political experience whatsoever, he got 150,000 votes, which, on an election scorecard, yeah, it's a resounding loss. But just looking at the numbers, he resonated with a lot of people out there that were looking for a reasonable option. So that's just one candidate that I wanted to highlight there as someone who, with very little political experience, if any at all, coming into this, made a difference in that race and gave a lot of voters an option that they were happy with. And then one final note on kind of the who's politically homeless after all of this. No Labels in Maryland disbanded. Actually, No Labels disbanded all of its state parties around the country. The national party still exists, I believe, but they have disbanded all of their state parties. So that just goes to show there are even more people here in Maryland that are looking for another option. And Forward is certainly going to try to be the best option for them if they're not comfortable with one of these other options. Looking ahead to 2025 and 2026, that's actually going to get really interesting. There's some local cycles in 2025, and then of course in 2026, we will run it back with the congressional slate, but there are also all of our state level elections at that point. We'll do state house, state representatives, county councils. So it'll be, that's probably more our playing field right now. It's much easier to make an impact on the local and state level than it is, in the federal government. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities, especially in areas like Frederick, Howard County, and Arundel County, places that I like to say have purple potential. You're probably going to have an open congressional seat in the 5th district, just given the age of the current representative there. And there are already people with significant name and resources kind of chomping at the bit to challenge Andy Harris in Maryland's 1st. So Maryland is in for an interesting couple elections here at the state level, and I'm hopeful and optimistic that Forward's going to get to play a positive role in that moving forward. Pun intended. Yeah, Bill.
So Matt, one of the incumbents there, Jamie Raskin, has been a real advocate for a lot of the electoral reform, particularly ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
Have we been able to establish any kind of relationship with him?
I would say that we have had, we've certainly been a part of what's kind of called the RCV, Ranked Choice Voting Coalition here in Maryland. There's a number of different organizations that are working to kind of move that ball forward. Fair Vote, I can't remember the exact other organizations. PJ has been the primary contact there, and they've been in contact with Jamie Raskin's office. And it is known that we are supportive of that bill that he put forward to advance ranked choice voting. And there are also a lot of members on the Montgomery County Council who have unanimously voted in favor of ranked choice voting, but have had it shot down a number of times. That we are supportive of that as well. So we've definitely been making a strong effort to build relationships with these people that are in office or significant coalitions that are trying to move the ball forward all around the state on ranked choice voting.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, and PJ, if he jumps in later, can probably give you more specifics on that RCV coalition. That's been his kind of his ball this year.
Any other questions or thoughts for Matt? Great,
All right,
thanks.
sounds good.
Okay, so again, folks in the audience, really looking to make this more interactive. So look for a way, ask a question. Let's have some more discussion, and we'll turn it over to PJ.
Or Pete.
I'm sorry, Pete. I'm sorry. Sorry, Pete.
The other one that starts with the P. All right. So we are very much into politics and watching out all these things, play out. But one of the things that Forward Party did from the very beginning is we were not going to be spoilers. So Forward Party took a stance at not running a presidential candidate because statistically it is impossible to get a third party candidate elected into a position. And then at the state level, we've had some fortune of having some connections going in with some of the candidates and being able to connect with folks like Hogan, also Delaney, who is running in one of the other races as well. But even those are kind of affecting nationally. And a lot of what we do and want to do here is to look at the local level and look at the things that we can do and how we can have an effect on this. So as you can see here from the map of all of the various different counties that we have, there's quite a lot. And to be involved in all of these is not possible without wonderful volunteers like you all. And so we are looking at different strategies that allow us to be able to make some change in the communities in which we live in and give that some focus around the people that we have that have some energy. So if you have some energy around working in your area, we definitely want to hear from you. One of the areas that has been starting to take off in the local areas has been Frederick. And we have several board members who are from that area or nearby. Also, one of our candidates that we endorsed in the election, Janie Monier, was made it through the primaries and was in the election, and she actually won second place in the election for Frederick Board of Education. So we're very proud of her. So we did a bunch of things to help her out, and doing postcards and filling things out and going out to different events and helping to campaign to help get her through. And so she's doing some great stuff. She's got some great ideas, and we'll build on top of some things there. We also, thanks for the clarification on that in chat there, Matt. Yep, second place. So the top three go through, and she was in second place. And the top three wins, so that means that she wins, and she is one of the people who will be on the board, along with the other two people who came in first and third. The other one that we took not a stance on, but that we took a participative action in was in Baltimore City. There was this thing called Question H, and if anybody here is part of Baltimore City, you may have seen this on your ballot, and that was a question about whether or not there should be a reduction in the size of the city council. And when folks came to us and approached us to talk about could we endorse one direction or another, we honestly didn't know what the impact was going to be. So what we decided to do was to hold a debate with the various different people. And so PJ went to work because he's in Baltimore City. He got 6 different people to join on as panelists and talk about this from both sides, multiple different sides of this, to find out more about what this position is. And so we held a debate to hear about the various different sizes so that we could post up a video, make the information available, and make sure that people are informed about the decisions that are being made for them. And that, I think, really encapsulates a lot of what we would like to do more of and continue to scale on, is to find out what are some of these local issues that matter to the people that are that are volunteers or just part of Forward or just part of Maryland in general, and collect some good information, find out what's going on, and help people to make good informed decisions. And I think that can give us a lot of power, because we're facing a lot of places in various different parties where it's kind of like, vote what we tell you to vote. And that just does not sit well with us and does not make us comfortable. And so I'm curious to see what you all think of that. A couple of other items of notes that we have up there. I'll go to what from the bottom up, because Matt was already talking about RCV. So we are working with various different coalitions, and so we've actually already had discussions about how to introduce ranked choice voting in the towns of New Carrollton and Laurel and Greenbelt, Hyattsville, College Park, Rockville, Frederick, Annapolis. It's already in
Tacoma Park.
Tacoma Park, and a couple other different places. And so we are showing up where everybody has passion for this and joining in the fight and helping to put these things through. Through our combinations with the RCV coalition, we have existing legislation that is ready to go, that could be rolled out to make it easier for cities to be able to enact this on a different level. We've already had discussions with people at the state level to say, and the State House has told us it's never gotten out of committee. And what they have said to the coalition is that they need to see how it works at the city level first. And if it goes well at the city level, then they would consider introducing a bill for it at the state level. So if you are part of a council of the city, or you know the people in the council in your city, and you think that they might be interested in this, or maybe they're already looking at RCV, please let us know, and we can come in and bring a whole bunch of great information to help them make it easier to roll out this process so that we give a chance to be able to give this a try in other different places. One of those places, like I said, is Laurel, and that also is the home of our very first winning candidate from last election cycle from 2 years ago. So James Cole affiliated with us, and then he won his position and has since become the president of Laurel City Council. We also had a former Forward board member who won election to the Brunswick City Council. And so we're very proud of John Caves out there in Brunswick. And we also have a special election that is maybe coming up in PG County, and we have a candidate who wants to run or is ready to run to replace Angela Alzerbrooks, who is moving on. But that also brings us to one of the other points that we're sort of getting into, which is that if we don't like an approach, a position, a take anywhere on the national level, we kind of need to be paying attention to when it happens at the local level as well. And I don't know if anybody here is also in PG County. I live in PG County. And what is kind of happening right now is if things are going the way they seem to be going, then they're going to run out the clock to hold a special election. And as a result, the county council gets to vote amongst themselves to basically pick one of themselves to replace Angela Alzerbrooks. And so when we look at this process here, the law was written in this sort of way that if somebody gets elected and there's 2 years left in their sentence, that is going to happen. So then there should be a special election so that we can elect somebody to that place. But what's happening in PG County right now is they're on track to just take that out of the hands of the voters and go ahead and choose themselves who's going to be the next county executive. And then that's going to have a chain effect with a bunch of other different elections in that area as well. So we're paying attention to that, not only for me because I live in this county, but because the whole idea of doing special appointments when you don't need to do special appointments is really taking the choice out of the hands of the people of Maryland and going against, the democratic process. And so this is something that we feel passionate about. And so we've had a bunch of people that actually went to attend to the council meetings over the past couple of days to see if we can get this reversed and get them to hold a special election. So those are the kinds of things that we are doing. And, we're putting together various different strategies, and I'll just kind of talk about my thoughts on this but I think, if you are passionate about a different area or a particular area, we want to find other people in your space. There's a lot of places we could be, but we can't be everywhere at once. So we want to find places of passion and be able to create support and help make things happen in various different districts based on who do we have on the ground in those areas. So if you know of something to do, let us know. And the other one that is, I'll mention, this is just sort of late breaking today. This came up on the council meeting for PG County. There is a lot of talk about power and electricity for data centers. And a lot of data centers are getting special treatments where they don't have to go through the various different things. And PG County was just trying to pass an ordinance which would have exempted various different power suppliers from having to go through a public review process. The same thing is happening up in Frederick counties. Now it's in Baltimore County. It's called the Piedmont Project. And so there's a lot of stuff that's happening to Maryland with no benefit to Maryland. And it's all being done in the background. And so we're trying to keep our eye on those types of things. So that's where we are kind of looking when it comes to local levels.
Thanks, Pete. Really good thoughts there and very helpful. Do folks have any questions or thoughts that they would like to share with Pete? Go ahead, Justin.
So out of curiosity, when it comes to the PG County special election, is there anything that the Forward Party is doing to get the local news or anybody who could spread the message a little bit more to essentially rile up the voters in the county and say, no, we want to be the ones to pick? Is there anything happening on that front?
Yeah, we actually do have some connections, and I'll let PG talk to it. So, because I know he's been doing some work on that directly. But yeah, that is a great approach to take. And sometimes all you can do is shine a light on it. And that's one way to do it. And so PJ, do you want to share anything that you're working on?
Yeah, that's great. We did reach out to a couple different reporters yesterday that we have connections with. One with ABC7 in DC. And another one with Maryland Matters, who tracks a lot of voting and electoral reform type issues. We we did get a hold of the ABC7 correspondent who has been tracking the story pretty closely. And that's mainly what we've been doing is one, to make sure that it's on their radar and that they're tracking, and if they can apply additional pressure to keep this in the limelight. And it sounds like they are tracking that and doing just that same thing. So, yeah, good idea.
And then I'll also say that if you or anybody else has any contacts or any people that you know in newspaper or radio or TV that could help us get the word out, we would very much like to know.
Yeah, I used to work for the Baltimore Sun well before it was acquired. So I have some connections there. How far things go at the Sun at this point, I don't know, but there might be something there.
And PJ, Justin and I are talking Thursday about his getting involved with us and helping us as a volunteer.
No, that's great. Thanks, Justin.
My pleasure.
So next, we move into a panel discussion in terms of what does this mean to the Forward Party, and I'll kick it off with Bill's opinion on this. You know, one thing is when I talk to folks about getting involved with the Forward Party, talk with a number of prospective volunteers, one of the things I share with them is that our founding fathers put on paper they wanted to create a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And increasingly, I believe we are a government of the party, by the party, and for the party, and everything for them, and that we're just increasingly being left out. And we need the Forward Party to get the people back in terms of, especially for the people, and to be for the people, it has to be by the people. So that's what we're trying to do. And with that, Bill's opinion, I'll turn it over to our three panelists and any other board members who want to jump in terms of a discussion of where does this mean for us and where do we see this taking us. So I'll ask one of our three board members just to kind of jump in and kind of start the discussion, and let's get a discussion started and other folks join in.
I mean, I can ask. Yeah, so Pete and Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I originally said about what do you think Forward can play, like what role do you think Forward can play in shaping a vision kind of for this future? Where do you see Forward playing a role in that? Both at the state level and maybe if we have time at the national level.
At the national level, I have no idea. That's each state, and I think we've learned this on these calls with all these other state leads, that how unique each state is, all of the different rules and processes just for even becoming a party, let alone managing one and being one and a successful one at that. Like it's complicated. Here in Maryland, I think that there's a real opportunity for the Forward Party to become the second biggest party in the state. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think the Forward Party can replace the Democratic Party in Maryland. We're trying not to be in a fairy tale here, but your average Republican here in Maryland does not align with where the Republican Party has clearly stuck its stake in the ground at this point. And I say that as someone who grew up in a Hogan Republican family here in Maryland, and one that worked in politics, and there's an opportunity there. Now you don't necessarily, what you want to avoid there is it's really easy to just slap a new name on something that used to exist and say, okay, we're just the Republican Party now. That you don't want to do that, because then you just end up in the same place that they're in, X amount of years later. So I think the opportunity is to build that coalition between, the center left, the center right, the middle. We know everybody we talk to is, for the most part, in somewhere in that range, or, very few people fit 100% within one party ideology or the other. And I think Forward has an opportunity to be a home for a lot of those people, more so than one of those two major parties, because of our structure, because we don't dictate policy top down. There isn't a list of policies yelled at us by the national party that we have to subscribe to or get primaried. Outside of election reform and not being deemed an extremist, which is somewhat left to our discretion, but among reasonable minds, you can pretty much rule them out. We give our candidates a lot of leeway on their policies, and then we let voters decide, because at the end of the day, no one's trying to change that, at least nobody here. So I think that our largest opportunity here in Maryland is becoming a place where a lot of people that don't have a political home can at least be comfortable.
So, Matt, if I could tag on to that, to become a political party in Maryland and be that force that Matt talked about, we have to turn in a certain number of signatures on a paper ballot to the state of Maryland. And for the last couple of years, been working and getting those signatures, and it's been a slower process than we'd like. We have an opportunity to significantly accelerate that process if we can bring in a professional company to help us, but that's going to take some money. So one of the things we're going to be reaching out to the world and to you, the folks on this call, is, can you help us get there? Can you make a donation? Can you reach out to friends, neighbors, others who share the concerns? And how can we get, enough donation to significantly accelerate and have Maryland be an official party next year instead of several years out? And so we'll be asking your help as to how can we get there.
That's a great point, Bill. And to give some data on that, we've been at this roughly a year and a half, 2 years on the signature collection front, maybe year and a half. And I don't know the exact number. I know it's on the site somewhere, and I know we always have some we still need to log, but we have 1,000, give or take. And
it's close to 2,500.
Okay. But that's it's a good number. We need it to be 10,000 at the minimum, but we've been advised by anyone and everyone that what you really need is 17,000, 18,000, because the Board of Elections and will throw away any signature that is remotely questionable. So years it's taken us to get that. One of these professional companies that does this as their business can get 20,000 signatures in a month and a half, and that's probably longer than they actually need. So to Bill's point, the acceleration, if we're able to bring in one of those firms, which is pretty much how this happens anywhere around the country, is significant.
So part of our plan is to reach out to our supporters and folks interested in the Forward Party, and make a small donation. But if enough people can do that, we can significantly accelerate that. So you'll be hearing from us on that in the next couple months.
Yeah, there's a lot that we can do inside of when we have party status, but there's also still a lot that we cannot do. And so this has been sort of one of I'll just share it as my personal vision, in that if we have to wait until we get party status, and then we have to run people into elections, that's going to take a couple years to get through and get the right people and get enough recognition. And we might have to do a couple goes at that. And then we might get somebody into even the state legislature, but then they're one person in the midst of hundreds. And so we have to get more people elected until we have a coalition where we can actually start passing bills and making a difference there. So the scale on effect, if it's just based upon party, getting people elected, is years and maybe even decades. So that, for me, cannot be the basis of what we do, which is why we're doing a bunch of these other things locally, and we're working with the Board of Election, and we're having these debates, and we're getting involved with the city councils, and we're doing all these other different things, because we have a chance to do something really great and do something really good at our local levels. And we can have an effect even when we don't have party status, and we can start to get known, and we can start to let people know what we stand for. And I think that brings me back around to one of the things I was thinking of, Brenna, when you were posting up there and putting that piece up there about the quote from the person, I forget what her name was. But it was the power of the vision statements and driving towards something and not necessarily just against something. And there is a huge sort of power in that. So there's a lot of different things, organizations I work with. I do a bunch of work with, if you've ever heard of Simon Sinek, and he has this thing called a Start With Why statement and a just cause. And had the fortune to work with a bunch of different places, and even with his company on fashioning out. And I figured out my own personal why statement, which is working to build a future that everybody wants to live in. And I think we need some kind of a vision like this that gets us activated, that represents who we are. And that helps us to understand and focus, our energies. But that is only, for me, half the equation. And as the last thing I'll say here, and I'd love to hear some feedback on it from other people, is that it also gets paired together with practicality. We are the party that got started by Andrew Yang, the math guy. And I know from my work in working with organizations, if you can have a great, fantastic vision, and then you can ignore all the data and get absolutely nowhere. And we got to do both, and we got to stay focused on both. What is realistic? So not only is it not realistic to run a presidential candidate, there's certain things that we can't do at the national level. For example, love to get Jamie Raskin helping us, because he's kind of a star in the Democratic Party, especially in Maryland, to help us to get local RCV. But the Constitution says that the national party or the national government cannot dictate how the elections are run at the state level. So his bill does not actually have any effect. All it does is create awareness that there's an issue and there's a problem on there. And if you don't understand the procedures of that, and nobody's actually walked you through the process of that, you could put a whole lot of effort and energy into backing Jamie Raskin's bill, and then nothing will happen out of it, because nothing could ever happen about it. And so I think if we have these visions of what we want to do, paired together with practical, actual things that we know that we can execute as strong plans, that is the core of what makes it possible for us to be able to change our little part of the world and, put in my terms, create the world that we want to live in.
Thanks, Pete. Matt Byers?
Hey, everybody. So yeah, I'm another one of the board members, and thanks, Pete, for the math discussion. I just want to add on to that, and I want to add on to what Heinz said and what Brenna said, and just sort of lay out the math of how we get ballot access through signature collections. Just really quickly, I don't want to take forever about it, but we figure the math is somewhere that we need less than $100,000 to get the signatures. Probably north of 80, probably less than 100. Sounds like a huge number, right? Not really, when you think about it. So if we got 5,000 people to give us $20, that would be $100,000. If we get 1,600 people to give us $20 for 3 months, that's $100,000. It's really not a huge amount of money to ask, but I mean, it has a huge impact. So what I'm suggesting is that you on the call and your friends think about, hey, can you do $20 for 3 months? Is that possible? And if you can do that, I mean, I've been doing $50 for 2 years now. And I'm capable of probably more, but I know you guys can help out a little bit. And if you can, then we can get ballot access and we can start making some of these changes a reality. So there's the simple math for you. So I hope to hear from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So, Mike?
Hi, I'm also another board member for the Maryland Forward Party, and I'm going to yes and Pete's statement of talking about practicalities. And one of the values I see of the Forward Party focusing on the state and even more so local elections. If you, in our talk with people who are doing local elections, county board of education, county councils, city councils. You can make a large difference with just a very few number of people and very few resources. So that, and your local town, your local county has much more impact in your daily life than state or even federal elections do. So that's also one of those, we don't have to have the world in order to make a difference. We can start building those relationships with county council members, with city council members, and make a difference that way, and essentially start this wheel turning. So that's also something which I think, too, focusing on the counties and focusing on local things is going to pay dividends for us.
Thanks, Mike. Anybody else want to jump in with a comment or question? Go ahead, Justin.
So, out of curiosity, coming back to the donations, what is the kind of messaging that you're putting out to create awareness around why these donations are necessary? Like, yeah, I'm curious from that front.
So, work in progress, and the thoughts we've been kind of sharing is around what Matt mentioned. If we can get the Forward Party to become a recognized political party in Maryland, there's a huge base of independents and dissatisfied Republicans and Democrats to give them a place to focus, and we can significantly influence elections. And with that, we can get people in office who will support the kind of electoral reforms for open primaries, for ranked choice voting, and for independent redistricting. So how do we get that critical mass to be a factor that can really get the right people in office that can make things happen? So I think Mike was first, and then Pete after that.
Yeah, just because it's one of those things I have been involved in. I'm sorry. We have tried a couple things. Nothing seems to have actually grown legs. So it's we're still in the trying to shape things and see what takes off phase. So we are very much open to trying new things and things like that in order to move these goalposts.
If I could tag on to that real quickly, Mike, for a second, then turn it over to Pete. One of the things we are rookies, we are amateurs in fund raising, and one of the things we're looking at is, again, just like what a professional company can do in the signatures, what could a professional company do for us in fundraising? Give us directions, give us suggestions, make us far more efficient. So we're trying to get smarter on that. We're trying to see who we might talk to that could give us that and is the right partner that we could team with to help our fundraising move to a different level than we as amateurs can try and do. Okay. So Pete, over to you.
Yeah, mine was going to be in a similar thing. So we have a lot of good, talented people, but we're just average Joes. And we're just trying to make this happen and pull things together. And I don't think anybody that is part of the board right now has a marketing background. We've got backgrounds in a bunch of other different things. I'll just talk for myself in that context, which is that my background is in building and designing products. So I know how to design a product, but I never learned how to market a product. And that's a whole different thing. The difference between building a great product and selling a great product. So we're looking for connections, and especially if you know somebody who knows, or anybody knows anybody who is really good at that skill and would like to join in, that is a gap that we need to fill.
PJ, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think, Justin, to your question, I think, and Matt Hines was talking about this a little bit earlier, the structure of Forward Party is a very different approach to any other party that's out there right now, where we're trying to create this more nuanced form of representation right now we have these big blanket policy platforms from the major parties that get applied to our communities. And our communities are growing more complex and more diverse. And that blanket policy platform doesn't always meet the needs of that community. I think what we're trying to do is create that flexibility with our structure for candidates to sometimes lean liberally, moderately, or conservatively, depending on any specific issue that we're looking at. It's a very different type of approach. And we not only do we want that level of flexibility, we kind of expect that level of flexibility and open-mindedness to focus on issues, not a forced policy or a forced at a party line.
Got it.
Thanks, BJ.
Understood. Yeah, and real quick, one, Pete, I'm also a designer. UX and product designer myself, but I also come from a marketing agency background, so I understand how the funnel works, awareness, consideration, conversion, all of that kind of stuff. My wife is actually the grants writer for BARCS, the Baltimore Animal Rescue and Care Shelter. So, I have a number of connections when it comes to SEO, marketing strategies, things along those lines. Now, whether or not they want to contribute their time to the Forward Party, that's yet to be seen, of course. But messaging is definitely very, very important. Really understanding, okay, it's not necessarily how is this benefiting the Forward Party, it's how is this benefiting me as the person that's giving my money to you, right? What is my benefit for this? So if you can have messages that are going to align with that benefit-driven, that value-driven approach, that's going to be a lot more effective than just saying, well, we're going to do all this stuff with your money, right? So it's something to take into consideration there.
Yeah, that's great.
Justin, thanks. I'm gonna take that and use that as a little bit of a segue. I've mentioned before, Justin and I will be talking on Thursday about places where he might help us as a volunteer. And as a volunteer organization, sorry about that. As a volunteer organization, we face two significant limits. That's the number of hours that our volunteers can give in addition to their work, their family, and everything else they have in life, and the amount of money that we've had donated to us to pay for things that we have to pay for as part of that. So we're looking for help, and a number of the folks that are on this call, we haven't had a chance to talk with you before, and would love to have a chance to talk with you and get your ideas, get your thoughts, and are there some places where you'd be interested in helping us as part of that? So I indicate if you want to throw a note in chat that you're interested, I'll reach out to you. You can send me an email. The email address is there. You can text me any way that makes sense for you. It's just going to be a conversation. I'm not trying to sell you something. I'm going to tell you what we need and where we need some help. And if that's something where you want to help us, then I'll get you in touch with the right people. But that can really help us continue to move this forward. And Justin, I'm really excited with some of the thoughts and ideas that you have and how we can take advantage of that and continue to grow. So with that, I'll open the floor to any other questions, topics folks want to bring up. And maybe at this point, we'll turn off the recording. So if folks have a comment or something that they would like to make, that's totally off the record, tell us what a terrible meeting this was or how we could better help them. They're open to that. And PJ, turn it over to you.
And PJ, do you want to be on the recording or off the recording?
Oh, either way. Yeah, we can stop the recording. Yeah, thanks.